The following video contains spoilers for Season 1 of The Lord of the Rings of Power, as well as the Lord of the Rings film series directed by Peter Jackson. Season 1 of Amazon's The Lord of the Rings of Power is now available in its entirety, and opinions on the J.R.R. Tolkien-inspired show are mixed. While critics and viewers alike have heaped praise upon the Rings of Power's cinematography and production design, eyebrows have been raised regarding the quality of the show's scripting, with one criticism being bellowed louder than all others. The series is far too slow. So in a setting with plenty of inspiration to draw on for rich characters, engaging backstories, and enough lore to appease even the most eager of fans, what's slowing things down? This pacing problem is the symptom of a much larger issue plaguing the show, and it's a problem that can be seen in a lot of modern filmmaking. The writers have prioritised surprise over suspense.
There's always been this dispute between suspense and surprise.
Entre le suspense et la surprise.
That if you have a situation,
si vous avez une situation,
and there might be a bomb under this table,
il peut y avoir une bombe sous cette table,
and we are having a very innocuous conversation,
et nous avons une conversation très anodine.
But suddenly, boom, this thing goes up.
Mais tout d'un coup,
the audience
boom,
are shocked.
Explosion, l'audience est choquée.
We're all injured or something.
Nous sommes tous blessés ou quelque chose.
It has been very, very dull. The scene has been very dull.
La scène est manque totalement d'intérêt.
Up until the time that
Jusqu'au
the
moment
bomb goes off.
Où la bombe explose.
People are shocked.
Et à ce moment-là, les gens sont choqués.
The shock will last 15 seconds.
Le choc durera 15 secondes.
Ease off
et ensuite, ça
minute,
s'atténuera.
2 minutes, and
Une
that's
minute,
that.
2 minutes, et puis c'est fini.
Now we go to the other version.
Maintenant, nous allons à l'autre version.
The bomb is under the table, and the audience are shown that it is there.
Et l'audience sait que la bombe est là.
At the beginning.
Au début.
They have been told, probably by the anarchist,
Ils
that
savent,
it's time to go off
probablement
at 1
par
o'clock.
l'anarchiste, que probablement que ça va détonner à 1 heure.
There's the clock.
Il y a la montre.
And it's 1:45.
Il est 1h moins le quart.
The conversation, which was so dull,
La conversation qui était tellement anodine, maintenant devient très intéressante.
Because the audience are saying,
parce que l'audience se dit,
don't talk such frivolous things.
Ne vous racontez pas des choses tellement banales.
There's a bomb under the
Il y a une bombe en dessous de la table.
And look, it's going off at
et
1
regardez,
o'clock.
Ça va partir à 1 heure.
This we play. Instead of 15 seconds of surprise,
au lieu
we can have 15 minutes of suspense.
15 minutes de suspense.
Brings me to the point.
Qui m'amène au point.
About providing the audience with information.
De donner à l'audience l'information.
Whenever you can.
Quand on le peut.
That was the true dark lord of filmmaking himself, an individual whose name has struck fear into the hearts of audiences for decades, Alfred Hitchcock. The Rings of Power is a perfect illustration of his theory at work. The writers have committed their efforts into surprising the audience, rather than working to build any kind of suspense, which ultimately results in a dull and muddled first season that seriously drags in the middle. The central plotline of The Rings of Power Season 1 focuses on elven warrior Galadriel and her relentless mission to locate and vanquish her people's ancient enemy, the Dark Sorcerer, Sauron. In the show's first episode, Galadriel is instructed by the elven High King Gil-galad to take a one-way trip to Valinor as punishment for her refusal to follow orders. Gil-galad believes that Sauron is dead and thus no longer a threat to Middle-earth. However, despite her king's orders, Galadriel abandons ship at the very last moment. While attempting to swim back to Middle-earth, she encounters Halbrand, a Southlander with a shrouded past. The pair are eventually transported to Numenor, an island kingdom of men, by Elendil, the Numenorian sea captain. It's a strong beginning. The audience are introduced to an interesting assortment of characters with conflicting backgrounds and experiences, creating plenty of opportunity for drama. But issues soon arise. Galadriel and co arrive in Numenor, where the elven warrior discovers that Halbrand, the handsome stranger, is the rightful king of the Southlands, and her best shot at rallying the Southlander natives against Sauron. However, multiple episodes are then spent going round in circles, discussing whether the Númenóreans should travel to Middle-earth to reclaim the Southlands in Halbrand's name. During these episodes, the developing friendship between Galadriel and Halbrand moves at a maddeningly sluggish pace, as the latter continuously refuses to disclose his origins. Galadriel does her best to convince him to fight. He does his best to maintain his mysterious edge, all while hinting at mistakes from his past. Instead of having the opportunity to grow closer, the pair, not to mention the audience, are left in plot limbo as the writers do their best to stretch the season out to 8 episodes. Fast forward to the final episode. Galadriel discovers that Sauron has been hiding in plain sight all along. Sauron and Halbrand are one and the same. Surprise! He had been deceiving her from the moment they met. And while this was a fun reveal, to quote Hitchcock, it was just 15 seconds of surprise. Sadly not enough to redeem an otherwise meandering, not to mention lengthy season. And herein lies the problem. Keeping an audience in the dark for so long, simply to create an opportunity to deceive them, doesn't only lead to a less satisfying payoff, it actually serves to confuse and frustrate viewers. It's difficult to digest the subtext of a scene when so much of what is going on is deliberately withheld. In Hitchcock's surprise scenario, the audience feels confusion, or worse, boredom, until all the pieces of the puzzle come into view and they can contextualise what they have seen to make sense of the plot. In the suspense scenario, the audience feels powerful because they see a much greater portion of what is going on than any one individual character. They see the bomb underneath the table. The thrill arises from being helpless to stop the characters from walking into dangerous situations. In Season 1, the writers failed to make the audience feel that Galadriel was ever at risk, and thus lost any hope of suspense. By not introducing the true threat at an earlier stage, the audience were left bored and disengaged for multiple episodes. Viewers had no idea there was a bomb underneath the table until it detonated. It would have been braver to allow the audience in on Halbrand's secret earlier, even if just a little. Galadriel's decision to return to Middle-earth with the disguised Dark Sorcerer in tow would have been agonising to watch. Real shout-at-the-screen television. It would have also helped to alleviate another fundamental flaw with the first season, the lack of a recognisable antagonist. An attempt to introduce a principal antagonist for the season is made in Adar, an orc-like creature whose origins are initially kept secret. But, yet again, we see the promise of engagement extinguished by a lack of suspenseful writing. When Galadriel returns to Middle-earth with the Númenórean army, her path crosses with Adar. When he is captured, he reveals to her that he is one of the first orcs created by Morgoth, Sauron's original master, and that Galadriel has foiled his plans to create a segregated society for the orc brethren, where they can live in peace. This in itself is a really unique premise, particularly when considering existing Lord of the Rings lore. However, because it is revealed after Adar has already been captured, it is, once again, just another example of 15 seconds of surprise. Let's compare and contrast the Rings of Power with Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings film trilogy. In the closing minutes of The Two Towers, after struggling to suppress his Gollum personality for the majority of the film, Smeagol resolves to regain the One Ring from Frodo by leading him to Caer Ungol and into the path of what is simply referred to as her. By not explicitly defining who Smeagol is referring to, or exactly what fate awaits our hero as he travels further east, Jackson and his co-writers plant their metaphorical bomb in the closing minutes of The Two Towers, carrying the drama not only to the closing credits, but halfway through the next film, The Return of the King. The scenario eventually reaches its fever pitch when Frodo enters the caves of Carathungal and finally comes face to face with an as yet still undefined her. In this situation, the audience feels both powerful and helpless. Powerful because they fully understand the situation. They are aware that Smeagol plans to manipulate and betray Frodo. And helpless because they have absolutely no means to stop it. In this scenario, we also have a recognisable antagonist, Smeagol, or Gollum. But audiences don't have to be presented with all the information for the suspense formulae to work. You can have your cake and eat it. In this example, the reveal that Smeagol has been referring to a giant spider is a really great surprise, and it comes at the end of a prolonged period of suspense. Far too often, films like Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker and Star Trek Into Darkness, and shows like The Rings of Power, put so much effort into trying to create gotcha moments that they actively prevent themselves from doing the one thing that a filmmaker should do. Craft a compelling narrative. Perhaps if the Rings of Power's writers can find a bomb to plant under the table in Season 2, audiences might find the show less of a struggle pacing-wise and significantly more suspenseful.